Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby, and I'm so excited for this episode on financial empowerment after divorce. My guest today is Steph Wagner, and she's a nationally recognized thought leader in women's wealth and financial empowerment, and the author of Fly, A Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom and Building a Life You Love. Fabulous book. I highly recommend.
Thank you.
So in her book, she shares her personal journey through divorce and reveals how she was able to fight her fears and create financial freedom so she could build a life full of joy and gratitude. Love that. Steph is the National Director of Women and Wealth at Northern Trust, where she leads the firm's advisory practice for women and its Elevating Women platform, a national program focused on building literacy and helping women use their wealth to create meaningful impact in their families, businesses, and communities. Steph is a frequent media contributor featured in top publications and broadcasts, and you may have seen her before. So I am so blessed that she is gracing me today with her presence. Welcome to the podcast, Steph.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here and be in conversation with you.
Yeah, and excited as well. Okay, so on this podcast, I've talked a lot about financial fear as one of the biggest fears when it comes to divorce. And I love this book that you wrote because it's a powerful story about how you conquered that fear and about your own personal journey through divorce and changing your relationship with money. And here you were, you went through this horrible thing. You had 3 boys. You became a single parent basically to 3 young boys. And you were not employed, and you had to just quash those fears and change your relationship with money. And so my first question to you is, how did you do this? Tell us about your story. Tell us how this transpired, because
Well, thank you. Thank you. It wasn't easy. I think that's the number one thing to say. And I love you recognizing and the work that you're doing, because as you're going through any life event, right? I mean, divorce was certainly my catalyst. It's such a big theme of what you're talking about. But any major life event triggers fear, because we have to really step in that uncomfortable place that we've never been, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it took me a while to embrace that this was going to be the next chapter. I fought really hard, to save something. And then I quickly became liberated when I realized that, wait, this doesn't have to define me, right? And I actually remember the moment where, and I think you and I may have talked about this as we, in our a prior meet and greet that we had, but I remember that moment where I was like, I have a choice. I can let this take me down, or I can do something powerful with it and hopefully teach my children resilience. And hopefully maybe even teach myself, because, I think every time success is one thing, but when we do fail, that's where we really learn about ourselves, right? And learn about the work we need to do. So the first thing I think was recognizing that I had to shift my mindset, that I had to lean out of fear and really embrace getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, and that's where growth would happen. And that was not easy, but, there was a lot of soul searching, and I'll be honest, a lot of riding my bike, for hours and hours, because that was a source of therapy for me, where I could sit with myself and think, I have an opportunity to look in the mirror and say, do I like what I see? And if I don't, how can I change it so that when I look in that mirror, I actually smile and feel good? And frankly, I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like operating in this scarcity mindset. And so I guess my first step is acknowledging where you are and really taking a proactive look at where do you want to be. And so much of that is shifting how you think about yourself and how you think about your situation.
I love that. That's so powerful. And like you, my thing was walking. I started walking I don't know, 6 to more miles a day with my dog, which was great. I had a little partner. But yeah, that just cleared my head, allowed me to think, kind of get into that frame of mind of like, who am I now? What do I want in this new life, this new me? And so yes, it's so important with what you went through as well. And I love hearing that you were open to those choices, because I think after going through a divorce, or, I know you don't just work with women who've gone through divorce. It's just anyone really. But that really creates, like you said, the scarcity mindset. And it often, instead of, even though we may know we have choices or think we have choices, we are afraid to venture out and look at those. Like, what are those choices? What do I do? How do I learn? What new skills can I obtain? And
if I can add, like, when we operate in that scarcity mindset, we really play life small.
Yes.
Right? We really don't have the capacity, because we're thinking, what if this, what if that, what if this? And we're thinking, honestly, of all the bad. And we're not, to your beautiful point, being open to the possibility. And life is too short. We can't afford to play it small. One of my favorite mottos is think big. And if you're not just a little scared, you're not thinking big enough. So sometimes the fear can be shifted. It's about, again, changing the mindset and using that fear as, maybe I'm actually on the right path. You know what I mean? Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be, but it can't be fear of letting go. It has to be a little bit of fear of what's on the other side. And ooh, that's scary, but you got to push through it, because once you get through that muck, I could tell you it's liberating.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. So I know in the book you talk a little bit about how you used to be in the financial industry before you had a family, and then you became a full-time mom, which, I did that for a short while, but not quite as long as you. And then, so when you got to this point in the relationship where you were going to get a divorce, you found yourself years later out of the financial industry. And what was kind of that? I know you said there were moments when you were biking and you were thinking, but was there a particular moment you can remember, like the aha moment that you said, yeah, what was that?
Yes. Well, you're right. If I can go back just a little bit. I did start my career in finance. In fact, I really, right out of college, I loved finance. I loved math. I thought everyone loved this topic. I thought all women loved it. I was an only child, so I didn't have that perspective, of talking to sisters or talking to even friends about this stuff. I loved it. And I got immediately into the crazy world of investment banking. And this was really in the early 90s. And then eventually by the late 90s, got into the even crazier world of private equity. And so I was not just in finance, I was in really, really sophisticated corporate finance. And to your point, life got busy. And I think, frankly, I faced a choice. I was 6 months pregnant. I had a 2-year-old at home. My husband at the time traveled 150 nights a year. I was asked to board a Cessna to go look at a deal in rural Alabama. And I was like, oh my gosh, something's got to give. And I didn't have a mentor to talk to. I didn't have anyone to consult with, and I quit. So, but your point of aha moment didn't come until 14 years later, because I really was pretty naive. I thought I can always go back and earn what I was earning. I never really valued what I was giving up. I never thought about it. I almost was overconfident when it came to my ability to go out and earn. And I undervalued what ultimately became the next phase of my loss of financial independence. Was I just eventually said, you deal with everything. I'm busy raising kids. I'm frankly sick of paying bills, sick of dealing with this stuff. You do it. And that nobody wakes up and says, I think I'll lose my financial independence today, right? It happens over time. And so I never had the wake up call until I was sitting literally alone on a park bench in Washington, D.C. after, he basically said, I'm leaving, and said, oh my God, like, how did I get to this point? How did I, it was the very first step of the wake up call. But It wasn't really until I was on my own after the divorce when I recognized I was still dependent on him. That despite being divorced, right? Despite our settlement being over, and I was technically in charge of my wealth, I was still receiving, child support. I was still receiving spouse support. I was assuming he would pay. And that's an assumption we can't make, right? Because we're depending on someone else and we don't know their circumstance. Maybe there's a time when they can't. And there was an aha moment of, I may say I'm financially independent because I'm on my own, but wait, I'm still dependent on someone else. My ability to meet my needs and meet my children's needs are still dependent on somebody's ability. And that was the ultimate wake up call for me, that in order for me to become fully autonomous around money, I had to own my financial life. I had to take charge of what I was going to do with my wealth to grow it and build financial security. But I also had to take personal responsibility of, what am I going to do to monetize, and to earn again and to reinvent my career, so that together, earning and then learning how to turn the money I'm earning and the money I was left in my settlement to build wealth together, that would create long-term financial security. And I don't think we think about all of those together. I think sometimes in our society, we focus too much on income and not what we do with that income to create wealth. Or we focus too much on what's in our on our bank accounts or our investment accounts, and we don't think about what we could be doing to invest in ourselves to earn more and ultimately to bring more joy to what we do. Because, when we like what we do, we typically end up earning more because it's part of our entire well-being.
True. Yeah. I love that story. And and I love the fact that you took all that and now you're helping other people understand it, because I think with finances, there's just it's a little different than, when you're talking about healing, than saying, oh, you need to forgive or you need to, get healthy. I mean, it's those kinds of things we can kind of guess what we need to do to make them happen. And we can figure out, if I do this, I'm going to feel a little better if I forgive this person, or if I eat this instead of this. But when it comes to finances, it's just a very different thing. I wanted to read a couple little sentences from your book here before I ask you the next question, because I really thought that they were relevant to this question. And the first one is, you say, women tend to hold a disproportionate amount of their investable assets in cash, causing them to jeopardize their long-term financial well-being. So we're going to talk about that. And then this part, which is a little different. And many of us, when faced with the possibility of divorce, find ourselves feeling like we failed as women and mothers, regardless of the circumstances. The shame around these feelings of defeat is immense, and they ultimately drive us to bandage the wounds to keep the peace. So with those in mind, I would love to get into, and I talk about this in my book as well, not the financial part, but just in general, but why do women have a harder time controlling their financial situation, financial matters? And how do they even get themselves in the situation?
Yeah, interesting. Well, there's a couple of things to unpack here. I think number one, in that second reading that you had of the shame, and, I think we are by nature, and generally speaking, of course, everybody is different. So I always say, I'm speaking in general terms, but, we're nurturers, right? We are so much of our identity as we go through life ultimately becomes wrapped up into, we're a wife, we're a mother, we're nurturing, we are the leaders of households, and so many, particularly on the emotional side. And, divorce for so long and still is in some parts of the country, not everywhere, but almost is like, looked at as failure. Like, something was wrong, and sometimes it's beyond our control. And quite frankly, and I'm not a proponent of divorce by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes it does create opportunity. It did for me to get closer to my truer self. But I didn't see it at the time. I really did see it as failure. And every ounce of me was really wrapped up into the identity of being within my family. And much of that is because I had left my career, and I really tackled life as a mom and as a wife, much with the same tenacity and grit as I did in my career. And so that was it really emotionally took me down, because, I'd always been able to, I don't want to say control things, because it's not about control, but to create solutions, move around them. I grew up with a lot of trauma, a lot of really, really, just difficult things throughout my childhood. And I had survival instincts, and I'm like, I can always survive this. I can always survive this. I just have to, and I almost conquered my fear that way and challenges. But this was the first time where I couldn't. Does that make, because I wasn't the one that initiated the divorce. He was. Mm-hmm. I didn't fall out of love. He did. I just didn't know he was falling. I wish he would have told me a little sooner. But anyways, so those were an aha moment of, I had to sit with this and I had to really, really process, right? Because so much of it was out of my control. But I think when it comes to finances, that same shame that I just described, a failure, shame is the number one thing that often holds women back with stepping in and leaning and really conquering their financial life. And, you sit there and go, why? What are they shameful about? Well, there's so often it's of what they don't know. And yet in so many cases, they may be unbelievably successful in other areas of their life, whether it be career or whether it be leadership in other different ways. But yet it's the one thing that they feel, I don't want anyone to see what I don't know because I don't want to feel less than. But the reality is it's because we're not talking about it. If we started talking about it more, we'd realize we all kind of have issues around this. Even someone that is an expert at it, like I was early in my career. So I think it starts, so often our lack of confidence starts with that, but that lack of confidence is what continues to grow and really, unfortunately, continue to hold us back, because confidence isn't something that you can gain from someone. It's something you have to earn inside. It's a muscle. And so if you're not practicing that, you're not growing that confidence, you're not taking risks, trying new things, failing, succeeding, whatever the case may be. And you've got to do that with money in order. It's the same as life, right? So that ties into that other reading that you did, where too often women are holding too much in cash. Why? Because they don't think that they make good investors. So in fact, statistically speaking, again, this is a stat out there, believe it or not, only 9% of women believe that they can invest better than their male counterparts. 9. That means 91% think that they can't. And so it's no wonder when you think about holding too much in cash, because they're afraid to take the risk because they don't have the confidence to know what to invest that cash in. Right. And yet cash doesn't just earn nothing. It earns less than nothing because of inflation. Right? So that's where, if you're not unleashing the power of money, if you don't know how money works, and you don't have to do this on your own, by the way. I think when you read the book, you get it. I don't teach how to buy a stock or how to buy a bond. I don't teach any of that. I teach about thinking about money differently. Right. And using tools to make confident decisions, to hire people, even to build your team, even to think about the opportunity costs of the decisions you make so that you're more motivated or empowered to make a change. And that's typically what unleashes women to say, you're right, I am holding too much in cash. So I love that you read those two things, because they are very much related, but I wanted to break it down a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's interesting you talk about kind of the maybe the feelings that a woman might have of not understanding it, and that brings the shame. But there's also the other component of the shame, which I talk about in my book too, which is society, culture, religion, family, and the way that we were raised. A lot of women weren't raised to learn about these things, right? And it was, you get married and take care of the kids, and this was obviously old school, but still prevails often today. You stay home. I mean, I did. I stopped working, practicing law for 7 years and raised my family and then went back to work. But a lot of women don't ever go back to work. And so they weren't taught, like, hey, you should learn these things and know these things and just let the man handle it. And it was, I don't know. So I think really we as women get this double whammy effect on that shame monitor, where, we might feel the shame because we're told that we shouldn't be getting divorced. Divorce is wrong, bad, immoral, whatever. We're sinning. I mean, whatever it is, if it's a religious thing, a cultural thing, a family thing. And then on the top of that, we're realizing, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything with the finances and I don't know how. So it's kind of this double kick in the pants, so to speak.
100%. If I could add something, I read, I quote it later in the book. It's actually, I think in chapter 10, but it's so relevant to what you're talking about, even with your relationship with money. And you're right. The number one thing to really unleash, your power with money is to understand your relationship with money and what you have to change. So I'd love to even unpack that more. But, you mentioned the traditional family, right? Mm-hmm. It's interesting. In the 1950s, 65% of families had that traditional bread earner, homemaker type of structure. And yet today, only 20% of families have that. And I would argue that number is continuing to decrease because of the huge rise in the cost of living. It's very hard now for families to be able to afford to do that, right? And who knows? I think it's gonna get harder and harder. But despite that, so 65 to 20 today, 65% of men still say they handle that's all of the finances. They are the primary. So we haven't shifted it. Well, the structure has changed and the times have changed. The roles when it comes to money haven't changed. So I love that you brought that up because we need to recognize that we need to change our roles as the situation changes. And we have to own that. Frankly, our male counterparts do too. It needs to become much more of a partnership. And so how do we get more comfortable with money to be part of a healthier partnership? That's where you're right. It comes down to unpacking our emotional baggage around it. Why do we not want to talk about it? Why did I abdicate despite the fact that I was good at this, that I actually loved it? That's so interesting. And I sat in that for a long time. And it's one of the reasons why I'm such a huge, it takes a whole chapter of my book, step 1, right? Of the 7-step process, understand your relationship with money. Because it wasn't until I unpacked the why that I said, this is silly. I need to make a change. And, for me, it was because money was such a source of stress and conflict in my household. And it was such an uncomfortable topic because my parents thought about it a lot. Like my dad controlled the financial situation in our house. I didn't want any of that to be part of my relationship. So it was just easier to say, you do it. And let's divide and conquer, and I'll handle this part, you do. And so, but again, that starts with really sitting with yourself and understanding. I'm just scratching the surface right now on the importance of understanding your relationship with money, but it's very complex and you've got to break it down and understand where you are today, where you've been and the why behind it. And most importantly, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Set a new intention around how you want to navigate it in the future.
Right. Beautiful. Exactly. So you kind of segued into the next topic that I really I'm excited to go through with you, which is in your book, you talk about the 7 steps to building a financial plan. So I'd love to go through those steps, briefly and just, and then at the end, I will share the link where people can buy. Your book comes out in a few weeks, right?
It does. We're right around the corner. Yeah. And so it's hard to believe. It's so weird. It is like birthing a baby. I'm like, oh my gosh. Except it's not 9 months. I will say this has been 12 years in the making. So
right. Wow.
Yeah,
it's good.
Thank you.
So why don't let's go through those steps and kind of give everyone a little teaser on what they're going to learn when they read your book.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, the first, as I said, is really understanding your relationship with money, right? And diving in. And we've talked about that a little bit, but through that chapter, I really give you a lot of tools to really get deeply connected to what does that relationship look like? And questions to ask yourself around how you were raised. And I think more importantly, if you think about how you were raised, what does it look like in your own family today? Are you carrying some of those limiting beliefs into, the conversations you're even having with your children or your spouse or whatever the case may be? But then, I think it's really important. You've got to know exactly where you are, right? You really have to assess your financial situation. That's not easy for a lot of people, particularly if you have a money personality that typically has been an avoider, where you're like, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. I know I need to do this stuff, but it's just easier. You know what? I'm going to worry about it another day. That personality, obviously you can appreciate it. It's really hard to sit and go, I got to know my numbers. It's like dieting. You got to really just assess. Here's the reality. How am I eating? How am I living? How am I sleeping? And if I want to change it, what steps do I have to make? Finance is no different. You've got to understand not only what you own and what you owe, but you really got to understand how you're spending the income you're making and do that homework to really get a good assessment of where are you because you can't make change if you don't know, right? I mean, that's your foundation. Next, I think you gotta commit to understanding how money works. If you don't know how money works, how in the world do you make those confident financial decisions? And so, I kind of go through just 4 basic principles. Everyone thinks this is complex, right? And they're like, oh, I hated math. I never was good at it. I always got, D's and C's, and it just wasn't my thing. Like, if you can add, subtract, multiply, or divide, you've got this. It's not hard. Again, a limiting belief that we hold inside our head. Right. But understanding the power that money actually has to earn for us, if we let it, if we really think about and make intentional decisions of where to put that money, it has more earning power than we actually do for the average American, right? It's just to your point about holding too much in cash. Most of the time, we don't let it. But the part that I love the most that I think you're really wanting to unpack is, now what do you do with this knowledge, right? How do you got to figure out, I believe, particularly for women in divorce, you've got to really create a vision for where you want to go, because that vision will keep you motivated, right? For me, I had to set goals. I wanted to start a business. I wanted to do something powerful with my story. I didn't know what type of business I was going to start, but I knew I couldn't go punch a clock and just do a day job. I just do a job to do a job and earn money, because I would have no joy. And I was already at a place where my self-worth was at an all-time low. I was so depressed and sad. And I'm like, I got to get excited about something. And so I started to create a vision, truly a vision, manifesting. I wanted to, I want to write a book. That was one, right? I mean, I literally went down and said, what do I want my life to look like 5, 10, 15 years from now? Sure, things could change, but those visions I had for myself would be a guiding light and would keep me motivated when times got tough. And so I think that's really probably the most important thing once you do the homework that I described, is to start thinking, what do I want this to look like? What resources do I already have? Because I just did my work. I just assessed the landscape. What resources do I have to try to reallocate to make those goals a reality? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And what it does, what I do is I try to lay out in the book 3 women that go through different types of experiences, right? They're all different. One's single, divorced, one is single young, and one's married, but has a medical crisis. And I try to use this roadmap that I'm describing and put it into motion. And what I also try to make it as simple as possible. What are 6 little things you can do that these women could do to dramatically change the trajectory of their life? And so those goals that I'm talking about are hugely important, because you can have a vision, but if you don't have action steps that you can take to turn the vision into reality, you won't achieve that vision.
But you have to have a plan.
You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. And then frankly, you've got to learn to execute that plan every day, right? Mm-hmm. So if you've got a plan that involves the framework around your spending, how do you go out into the world and interact with, all the temptations to make sure you stick to your plan so that you don't blow that and spend too much more and then run up debt, right? Or spend too much more and be pulling it out of savings. So that's an important step too within the book is, action without vision doesn't work. Vision without but when you put those together, you better know how to execute them every single day so that it sticks. And so we unpack a lot of those fun challenges. I like to make money fun. I like to make them make things fun.
Wait, can I interject for a second?
Yeah,
I know
please.
There was part of in the book that you talked about. You were trying to get your sons, because one of your sons said, "Hey, mommy, are we poor?"
Oh,
you were trying to kind of get your sons excited about this plan that you had. And so you had put money away for certain things. And so you put money in it, because one of your sons, you said, liked to go to Chick-fil-A nuggets. So you put money in an envelope and you kept it in your car. Yeah. And when your son would say, "Hey, I want to get some chicken nuggets," you'd say, do you have enough money? And he would check. And so he learned the value of that money. Like, it just doesn't come from a tree. It's in this envelope, and I better And I loved that example.
Yeah. Well, one thing, if I can expand upon that. So, because I think there's some really great lessons I'd love to pay forward is, I had a vision for myself, right? I wanted to start a business. I just mentioned that. I put all my action plan in place of how I was going to achieve that vision so that I could make a plan and know exactly what I was going to do. But I forgot to tell my kids the goals, by the way. And so when all of a sudden they started to see me implement the action plan, I sold the house, I bought a less expensive car. And that's when my middle son at dinner, as we're eating leftovers, says, "Are we poor?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So let me just stress, oftentimes it's great to pull your family members into the vision and into the goals and talk about it. Have open conversations of, here's the goal, guys. Here's why I'm doing this. Yeah. It's not that we're poor. Right. It's because I want to achieve those goals and I want to do it together because I want you all invested in it because we need to all be rowing up the stream together so that when you do ask, and that was my youngest son, all the time for things and I'm saying no, there's a reason why I'm saying no because we have a goal to achieve. And I think I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think there's some really great lessons that we as parents, here I am on a path going, oops, I forgot to tell them. And now they're writing a money message that isn't true. But they're helping, they're learning and they're also helping you, as you say, to stay the course, which is fantastic. And then they get to see the results because they did see me start a business and they did see so much of what we talked about that was on that vision board come to life. And I think it helped them realize, and now all of them are grown and 2 out of 3 are launched out of college and one's about to graduate from college here in another 6 months. But I look back now and I think I underestimated the gift of letting them be part of it because they saw the successes, they saw the pitfalls, they saw the failure, they saw the challenges. And it built resilience inside of them and a nice roadmap for them, for them to follow. So thank you for highlighting those two things because there's some good lessons to pay forward on those.
Yeah. So, okay, talk about building the team. That's your next step.
I am here. I write this whole book is about building confidence and being empowered inside. And I think the number one thing to pair with that is this is not a DIY job, This book is not meant, I don't believe that you should be doing all of this on your own. It's very, very important to build a team. And what that team looks like, though, depends on everybody's situation. And I think that's another really important thing to stress is one size doesn't fit all. We all are different. We all have different issues we're trying to solve for with respect to our entire financial life, not just the numbers, but everything, depending on our goals. And the advisors and the professionals that we need to pull in differ depending on what that looks like. So I guess number one, don't just do what somebody next to you is doing because their situation looks different and it might not be the right solution. But you got to have advisors around the financial part of your life. I'm a firm believer that not enough of us are really focused on the estate planning part of our life. So many people say, I don't have enough wealth. I don't need a will. Yes, you do.
Yes,
your
house should be in a trust,
and especially in California. And I know that's where you sit. In other parts of the country, that may not be the case. But you got to learn about that. So learning in your literacy isn't just about the nuts and bolts around finance. It's got to expand on all aspects of your entire financial life. So that also includes taxes, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that you get the right support and help around taxes. Again, it's not one size fits all. Yeah. So that step within the book really breaks down what are all these financial advisors that are out there? What do they really do? What are your needs? And so I prompt a bunch of questions so that you can think about it. Who's right for you? Same thing with again, who's preparing your taxes and who's helping you with your estate planning, whether it's an online resource or a live person. But I think the number one thing is, my recommendation is equip yourself with the knowledge of the questions to ask all of these people, right? And so that you can figure out who is right for you so you don't get somebody you don't need and pay too much or shortchange yourself and pay too little when you actually need more. And so I try to demystify this whole experience about building your team. And, you know, I'll tell you, I was so overwhelmed when I did this because a lot of these people assumed I knew a lot more about personal finance than I did because of my background. And that built a lot of shame and embarrassment of me because I didn't know anything about personal finance. They just assumed, and they were throwing out around this jargon and all that. And I didn't push back. I never said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm here to say, as you're looking to hire anyone, no question is a dumb question. And remember, they're going to work for you. And so you've got to be comfortable asking any question and knowing that whoever you're working with is supporting the expansion of your own financial literacy, that they're not just giving you a bunch of rules to follow, that they're helping you in this journey and helping you grow throughout the entire process. And it's key. These are people that are going to work with you, not, and alongside you, not at you.
Yes. And I have to say, you do a beautiful job in the book of explaining the differences, like between a CPA and a financial advisor and different designations they may have and what they do. And so that was really wonderful because there was something that I'd never heard of. I can't remember what because I have a financial advisor, I have a CPA, but there was something you were talking about, some designation that I'd never heard of. So I think that you did a great job of that. And
it's confusing. I mean, it really is. And sometimes I think the industry almost intends for it to get confusing because it makes you need them more, or you think you need them more. And so, but once you break it down and you put it all into buckets, it's not as confusing as it might seem at the surface. So I'm glad it resonated and it was helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last step you talk about is getting smart with your love life. And some people may say, well, what does it have to do with finance? But yeah, let's get into that a little bit.
Oh my gosh, everything. Because here we are, like you and I are both so passionate about building, economic empowerment and autonomy. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, great. So how do you build independence and still be open, to building a life with someone else, or maybe embracing a different life than you didn't think about? Because when you have financial autonomy, you have choices. And I think that's so important is you have freedom. You don't have some of the things that make you feel like you need to be dependent on anything or anyone. It's very, very liberating and empowering. And so I try to break down when you are in a marriage, right? The importance of having more of a partnership around the financial part of your life. And kind of the how around it. Like, what does that actually mean? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you both are doing everything equally. It's just dividing and conquering and knowing both people. There's two voices at the table. And how do you build yours, mine, and ours? At the end of the day, that's what it's really all about, right? How do we honor our own autonomy? How do we honor the autonomy of our partner? And how do we come together and create something beautiful as one? Mm-hmm. I think it's taking a hard look at how we both look at money and the partnerships that we've built around our financial lives. I think it's the number one thing that causes conflicts within couples. And yet I do think with the right steps, it's something that can bring us together versus apart.
Also, though, if you don't mind if I jump in.
Yeah.
I know because you talked also about after divorce and being single and doing all these things and having this plan and then eventually maybe finding someone you want to be with. And so at that point, you need to do more of this, or you need to know, right, what you're going to do. Because at that point, you're hopefully financially independent, right? So that also becomes, I would think, and it did for me, at least, a point where you say, wow, how's this going to work? What do I do if I find somebody and I fall in love and we want to spend our lives together?
Right. Well, exactly. And so, but I think first and foremost, as you said, is sitting and embracing the beauty of being alone is so important. It's where growth happens, right? It just does. And I think too often we rush into that blueprint that we thought that perfect person should look like. If it's this, and too often I think it might, if you don't do the work, it resembles the marriage you just left. Right. But you got to sit and be alone to kind of unpack and do the work and learn more about yourself and frankly, love yourself. because you can't really love someone if you don't love yourself, right? I mean, that's hard to even, and so I do believe in the beauty of even if you are in a partnership, and I know I unpack a relationship that I had where we were really honoring our own autonomy because we were both in this personal journey. But when you do ultimately find, don't lose that independence that you worked so hard to achieve, but also respect the autonomy that potential partner has worked so hard to build as well. Particularly later in life, right? It's so different than when we meet someone when we're young and we really don't, we may have autonomy, but it's not the same as when you have an entire life that you've built, maybe even a family. And then suddenly, that partner later in life, you really have to honor the journey, of each other and respect the independence that each individually has worked so hard to achieve.
I love that. And communicate.
Amen.
Yeah. That's the problem in so many relationships. And I think I saw that, years after marriage when I met somebody and, he having his kids, I have my kids, and they're all grown up, but still we have our separate finances and we have, separate paths and things like that. So it's interesting that you have to communicate to figure out how to make that work.
Well, you do. And there's no rule to follow. Like I couldn't sit here and say, here's exactly what you do when you come together as two financially independent and in many ways emotionally independent, with a lot of autonomy around your lives. Here's what you do. Here's the recipe. Yeah. It's not. It's not one size fits all either. You said it beautifully. It's about communicating, and it's about honoring. And it's also about knowing, and this maybe goes back to earlier in our conversation. Every single one of us has a different relationship with money.
True.
Every single one of us has a different history, a different way we were raised, different strengths and weaknesses around it, right? Mm-hmm. Challenges and things that work to our advantage when it comes to our emotions. So remember that in your future partner, right? That it's not what you say around money, it's how you say it to make sure it lands in a way that will be received versus trigger anxiety or a source of conflict or whatever. So as you do the work to explore your own relationship with money, as you're entering into a new relationship, it might be really helpful to really sit and explore that relationship of that partner. I think you'll have better conversations around the entire topic.
I love it. It's great advice. So, wow, this has been so wonderful and enlightening. And I'm excited for people to read your book. I wanted to read one more thing before
Please. Thank you.
Here. So you say, life's pivotal moments, the painful ones and the joyful ones, often create exhilarating opportunities that can reinvigorate you in exciting and unexpected ways. Mm-hmm. But one of the cornerstones of this shift is financial independence created by you, not someone else. And I just have to say that is one of my favorite quotes of the whole book, because the whole idea of healing from divorce and in all of the parts, whether it's the financial part and the health part and the, confidence, but there's so many parts of healing, and everyone's different, like you said, in all of those. So some people need something, some people need others, but we have to always remember that you have a choice, like you said, and that you are the one who can change your life, not someone else. No one's going to knock on your door and say, hey, I'm here to solve all your problems. You have to figure it out, and you have choices. And as long as we remember that and work toward that goal of becoming that I'm the one to create my own life, we'll have a beautiful new life, rest of the life to enjoy.
And truer to who we really are, because we designed it, right?
Exactly.
We did the work. Exactly. So thank you for that. And I think it's more powerful than you think. It's just you find something in yourself that you never thought you had. And that discovery will help serve you at every single pivotal moment for the rest of your life, because we all know, right? There's going to be a lot of them. It's the only thing constant in life is change. So, it's a gift for me that has kept on giving. So thank you for recognizing that.
Oh, thank you. And once again, all the links are going to be up at the end of the podcast and the show notes if you're listening on audio channels. And This book is phenomenal. I highly recommend it. And I highlighted so many things. I had a hard time picking. I wanted to share some things with you that Steph wrote, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Sharing all your knowledge with us. And just know you out there who are facing this, that you can do it.
And you're not alone. Yeah.
You're not alone.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Thank you again. And if you like this episode or any of the other episodes, please, please, please help me by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to this channel. I try to bring you wonderful guests like Steph and help you through your journey of healing from divorce. And I thank you, Steph, again for being here today. It was really a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the great work you are doing, because it's very, very important.
Thank you. Take care.